assume that you already know all of that and you come here for very specific things. So welcome everybody. And for today's session, we've got Michelle Geere. Okay, you know Richard Geere?
Yep. my brother.
That's right. Proximity is power, and sharing names is super powerful. Right. So Michelle is the CEO of Adbot, and Adbot makes it super easy for anybody to run Google Ads. So a lot of you know that you can run Google Ads and you can get started. But when you get into Google Ads, how many of you know what to do when you're there? It's like somebody says, hey, you got all the ingredients in the kitchen to bake the best cake. Just go do it. And be like, where do I start? So you got everything. So that's how, when you go to the Google console, it's confusing when you go to Google when you're trying to run your AdWords. So our Startup Circles, we use Adbot, and we share with you the link that you can use if you want to get started on Adbot. We share that in the chat box. But most importantly, today, Michelle is going to teach us how to successfully advertise online. How many of you have been told that digital marketing is very important, but you actually just been throwing your money into the Google or Facebook black hole, and the money just disappears and you're not getting the results you want? So this is what Michelle is here to talk about. So Michelle, welcome to Startup Circles. Welcome to today's session.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandras. So I'm going to try and share my screen because I have got a bit of a presentation for us. But even though there's a presentation, it's going to be super informal. So guys, you must ask me questions at any point. You must put up your hand, and Sandras, maybe you can monitor the chat box and see if people have got questions, and just interrupt me whenever you want to.
Great.
Okay, so maybe just a background of where I come from. So I've been in the digital marketing business for the last 15 years. And I've worked for some award-winning agencies in South Africa, including Glue, which is now part of Ogilvy, Hello Computer, which is now part of FCB. And we worked with clients like, for example, FNB and South African tourism and all the likes. And I remember when I started out in my digital career, we actually were one of the first agencies that put our clients on Facebook, which is now many, many moons ago. And that was before Facebook actually even had a business solution. So it was quite revolutionary for the time. And it's amazing to see the industry grow. Subsequently, I've started my own businesses. I started a digital agency and then kind of like identified that smaller, medium-sized businesses really have this almost like, let's call it like an unserviced market. You guys are kind of like, we found that you're kind of like stuck in the middle of like, it's really complex, like Sandras has said, to advertise online. And it's also really expensive if you're paying an agency, because you have to pay them by the hour, very similar to a lawyer. And it just becomes too much for a startup. So based on that kind of insight, we started Adbot, and I'll explain a little bit more later on how Adbot works. But we're going to start off kind of like today, just taking you through like my philosophy of online advertising and how I approach it. And literally, this is the technique that I've used for Adbot and for previous companies. And what's really interesting is like to see that this is something that really starts working. Let's see if I can share some of my experience with you guys. Like I said, it's very, very informal. Just ask questions if you want. The only thing is that I want you to take 3 things from the session today. And those 3 things is, number 1, advertising is psychology. Number 2, spread your channel wings. And number 3, don't think you're smarter than you are. And we're going to run through each one of these, and hopefully at the end, it will make a lot more sense than slide number 2 does now. Okay, so advertising is all psychology. I don't know how many of you guys know this, but there is a field of study a couple of academics and researchers that get together and they study the human compliance. In other words, they study how people actually say yes before they think, right? And it's interesting because we're humans and our brain works a certain way. There's certain triggers that we can kind of like, people will kind of face or throw at us, and we will say yes automatically without even thinking. And all of us are the same. And that's really interesting. If you want to know more about it, there's books like, for example, Influence, Think Fast and Slow. Those are two really good ones that describe the actual workings of our brain and why we manage like that. And I'm not going to get into all of that details. But to kind of like just let you know that advertising is just making use of these tools, of these triggers to get your customers to say yes without thinking, right? So advertising is like obviously telling people about your product and whatnot, but ultimately you want them to purchase, right? And advertising just makes use of these techniques in order to do it. So these kind of academics have formulated, and if you read the books, you'll kind of like see all of these kind of triggers, but they've formulated 7 triggers of compliance. And those 7 triggers of compliance get you to do 3 things. It gets you to cultivate a positive association, reduce uncertainty, or motivate actions, right? So these triggers these techniques that they give you makes your customers do these kind of like 3 things. Now, I want to give you a practical example of what I mean by these triggers, right? And a practical example of the psychology that I'm talking about. So how many of you have kids? If you haven't got kids, maybe you were a kid. Obviously, you must have been a kid at some point. So you're 18 years old. You really, really, really want an Xbox. I think that's what kids have these days. A rock set tape in my day, but yeah, so you're 18 years old, you really, really want this Xbox. What do you do as a kid, right? 18-year-old kid. You start taking out the trash for your mom, right? You take out the trash before she even asks. You do your homework, you bring her a cup of tea. Why? Because you want to cultivate a positive association, right? So can you start seeing the psychology is not out there. It's not messaging that's kind of like this big, massive thing. It's really practical things. And if you sit down with your brand and you think about how the psychology is applied, you'll actually get your messaging really, really right. Okay. So the first one is you cultivate a positive association, right? So now you are kind of like moving further down this desperation of the Xbox is growing. You take your mom to kind of like a sports day, she's there, and you actually tell your teacher to tell your mom that you've done such a good job at school, and that's just kind of like reducing uncertainty, like telling your mom like you've really worked for this, you really earn it, like this is the thing that she needs to buy for you. And then the last point is like you get to a point where it's desperation, and it's like literally, mom, it's 5 days before my birthday, or mom, there's 5 left, or dad, please, I want an Xbox. So it's a very kind of like similar mindset, and it's a very similar action that you go through when you are preparing and putting together your messaging for your clients. So yes, of course, you can talk about the products, but if you start thinking about like, how are you going to take your clients from cultivating a positive association to reducing uncertainty, that by the time they get to motivating action, it's going to be seamless, and they're going to do it without thinking. And that's kind of like where you want to get to. So this is the psychology, and I'll show you how close the psychology is, or the academic field is, to advertising. In advertising, we use the following terminology, and you'll see how close this is. And we call this the marketing funnel. Creating awareness, sounds similar. Creating awareness, creating a positive association. Reason to believe, reduce uncertainty, same thing. And then call to action, which is motivate an action, right? So all these like fancy marketing terms is only kind of like reduced from this academic field, right? So creating awareness, reason to believe, call to action. If you've got those 3 kind of like messages in a row, you'll definitely be able to convince your clients to purchase your product as they move through your kind of like user journey, which is on the different platforms. Now, I want to give you an example of maybe a brand that is following the psychology that's using the advertising funnel. So if we look at Puma, Puma makes sneakers from recycled plastic. So what they'll put out there is they'll say their first messaging is like, we make sneakers from recycled ocean plastics. Right, that's great. That's wonderful. We're in the space where we need to save the planet. Everybody knows about it. So yeah, this is a really positive association. They're doing something good. I'm going to buy these sneakers. I'm going to feel good. So there's a great positive association. Reasons to believe is then the second part. DJ Zintle is wearing Pumas to help save our planet. So what it's doing here, it's saying other people are doing it. Maybe you should be doing it as well. It's you don't directly say that, but you insinuate that, which is kind of like starting to build that reasons to believe. And then your last call to action is like, hey guys, these things are flying. There's only 5 pairs left. Or for a limited period only, these 5 pairs are going to be signed by DJ Sinclair. So you're creating a little bit of kind of like scarcity. Okay, so that's quite simple, right? And easy to understand. I don't know if you've got any questions before we go to the next section, where I'm going to explain that now that you've formulated your messaging, which is quite specific on what you're going to say, how are we going to apply those to the different channels? So Sandras, I don't know, do you want to maybe, are there some questions that we can answer, or do you want me to run through?
There are no questions at the moment, but anybody who's got questions, you just type your questions in the chat box. I'll take note of them, and then I'll ask Michelle. Fantastic. You can go ahead, Michelle. This is really good.
Okay, great. Okay, so now you've got your messaging. You know you're going to create a positive association. You're going to make sure that you give your clients a reason to believe, and then you're going to give them a call to action and kind of create a bit of a desperation situation where they have to say yes, right? So you've got these 3 kind of like messaging, and you've got all these channels, these online channels. There's Facebook, there's YouTube, there's so many. I think when I started in the digital world, there was like 2 or 3 channels, and now there's endless amounts of channels. There's emails, there's all sorts of things, Google search, etc., etc. Luckily for us, the channels actually matches our different kind of like messaging. And I'm going to explain it to you in a way that I really understand it really well. Maybe this works for you guys or not. But when you are creating a positive association or you're creating awareness, I usually put those on channels that I call lean back channels. So think about it. When you've got your phone in your hand, you're on Facebook. More often than not, you've got your TV screen in front of you and you're leaning back on your couch and you're scrolling through Facebook, right? So you're not looking for something specific. You're not necessarily interested in finding something. You're just browsing. So your state of your body is lean back, right? Same with Instagram, same with YouTube. YouTube, you're kind of like leaning back in your chair or your couch and you're just scrolling, going down that rabbit internet funnel, as I would call it. Those are lean back channels. And in those channels, what we want to hear is positive associations, positive things that make us feel good about the brand, creating awareness about this is a brand out there, but this brand is something that I care about because there's some association with, like, for example, our example is the planet, right? Then elements like, for example, when you want to motivate action or you want to get people to do stuff, and you want to kind of like focus on conversion, you look at channels where it's lean forward, right? So when I have a broken geyser, I'm going to my computer, I'm leaning forward and I'm searching for a plumber, right? That's a lean forward channel. So when you're wanting somebody to take action, you look at channels that are lean forward. When you're wanting to create awareness, a positive association, or give people a reason to believe, you're looking at lean backwards channels, right? So really easy to kind of like understand now. My positive association, so let's take Puma, for example. We make sneakers from recycled ocean plastic. That we're going to blast on YouTube. We're going to put that on Facebook. We're going to put that on Instagram. So those are kind of like the lean back channels. Then when we look at, like, for example, the second one, which is reasons to believe, those are also going to be channels like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but these are going to be channels from other people. So you can say, as the brand, DJ Sintle is wearing my sneakers, or you can ask DJ Sintle to put it on their Facebook channel, which gives the audience a reason to believe. So it reinforces the fact that this is the shoe for your customers to purchase. And then your last one, which is there's only 5 left, that usually goes on channels like, for example, directories or Google search, right? So Google search is a really important kind of like platform. South Africa, unfortunately, don't have directories like the Yellow Pages anymore, who have a strong presence. And therefore, Google is kind of like taking over that market. So your lean forward platform in South Africa is very much Google search. And in some cases, you can get Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, and those other marketplaces that are out there, OLX, etc. So that makes sense. So once you've got your messaging, you apply it to the channels that's relevant to the messaging, and then you're ready to kind of like go. You guys ready for the second part? Don't think you're smarter than you are. It's a big lesson to learn when you're an entrepreneur or a CEO, I think. So Sandras has asked the question before, but who's used Google Ads before? Maybe just a show of hands, or maybe say in the chat box if you have.
Type 1 in the chat box if you used Google Ads before. Type 1 in the chat box. Let's see who's used Google Ads before. Fantastic. Leslie Mkwada's used Google Ads. Nick Cheru, Michelle Carusa, Mandla, Petrus Van der Voort, Miss Trini, Yarrow Betsy. Oh, Yarrow. Adelaide.
You guys are impressive.
Yeah, it's like lots of people have used Google Ads.
Great stuff. That's really, really good to know. So everybody here at least knows the importance of Google Ads. Like, if you're not on Google Ads, and I'm talking specifically about search ads, you're missing like a massive opportunity to market for people who are leaning forward, looking for your product or your service. So please, if you haven't used it, definitely a channel to consider and to use, right? We do quite a lot of marketing research, and you guys might be able to kind of answer this as well. But what we found is that entrepreneurs who are starting out, they're a one-man band, maybe they've got like 2 or 3 employees, they're spending up to 20 hours a week doing Google advertising. Now that's a hell of a lot if you have to work out your logistics, you have to work out employment, finance, sometimes having to pack those boxes yourself, sometimes having to produce the actual product yourself. So it's almost half a week that you're spending on advertising or Google advertising. And the reason why you have to spend that much time on Google advertising is because what Google requires on the platform, and those of you guys who've already used Google search know this already, you have to find keywords that matches keywords that people are searching for. And those algorithm changes on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. You have to try and figure out what these people are searching for. You have to also kind of like have a look and see what ads do I need? What ad copy do I need to write there? Remember the messaging we were talking about? What must I write for people to click on my ads? And that kind of like takes up a lot of time trying to figure that out. And then what they do, or what you guys do, is you then use like 2 Rand and 5 Rand and you move your budgets between the right ad copy and the right keywords. Now that is a hell of a lot of time spent on moving budget around to make it effective and efficient. And that is really, really where the time consuming kind of like part of Google AdWords comes in. And something to remember is that Google AdWords changes all the time. The Google algorithm changes all the time. And my advice to you today, the biggest point, well, maybe the 4th biggest point, is that you can't outsmart the Google algorithm. And I sometimes think Google does this on purpose so that they can make money, but that's my conspiracy theory. But essentially, think about it. If you've done your Google AdWords yourself, what is the maximum click-through rate that you've received? And this is on all your key terms, not your kind of like just your brand name, because obviously you're going to rank quite highly for that. But what we found is that if you're a human and you're doing this for a small or medium-sized business, the chances of you getting a click-through rate higher than 2 to 4% is very, very small. So 2 to 4% click-through rate is kind of like what you're looking at the moment. But luckily, there are programs like systems and companies like Adbot, and I'm going to give you a name of a similar company that does the same thing for Facebook as well, that can kind of like match the algorithms of Google. So what Adbot is we do that day-to-day kind of optimization that I explained a little bit earlier, the keywords, moving around budgets, making sure that the best copy and the best keywords are getting the attention and the money is being put behind that. We've written an algorithm that actually matches the algorithm of Google's, and we use all our clients or the data to kind of like make sure that you are actually prepped for industries that's already been on our platform. So you don't even have to learn how to do it. We will have some data and information of somebody who's done it before, so it already puts you in kind of like a bit of a lead. So that's kind of what Adbot does. So I just want to quickly take you through a little demo to show you how quick it is to load Google Ads. I'm going to have to switch to my browser. So just give me a sec if you guys don't mind. There we go. You guys can see, right? We are, yes. So I'm going to play. Sandras, just let me know if you can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how quick it is to set up Google Ads. Remember, once you've gone through this process, we've opened a Google Ads account for you. We've loaded your first ad. And by the time you've loaded your credit card, your ad will be live as soon as Google approves it on their side. So here goes. I'm going to talk kind of like through a bit of it. This is a copy of our UK site, but when you log in from SA, you'll see rands, and I'll give you two kind of like URLs that you can go to. Very easy, fill in your email, register with email. You'll get an email sent to you. And this process is just to verify and make sure that you're not a robot. There can only be one robot in the village. It takes you then through to the setup process. There's videos that you can watch to see. And here we set up our ad. So here we're going to actually load the city that you want to advertise in. Could be Lagos, could be South Africa, could be also just a region like, for example, Sea Point. The next part that we're going to do is fill in your ad copy for search. So you'll see it over there. And you're going to put in kind of like your descriptor and your unique selling points. And along the way, you've got these kind of like examples of what to do. Put in your URL. And then the keywords. What's great is that you only have to put in between 3 and 5 keywords here. And the machine will pick up and do the rest. Yeah, enough keywords for us. Click next. Then you'll fill in your address. And this is purely for billing purposes. You put in your name, email address, and password so that you can log back in and see your information and data at any given time. Then you see a summary, your billing details. You can view videos as you go. Also note that you'll have a discount. So if you spend more than 1,000 Rand, we will give you 600 Rand off. I just want to stop this guy. Great. So in that time, what is that? Under 2 minutes, we've opened your Google Ads account. We've set up your ad and you're ready to go, and you'll be live within a couple of minutes. And then the machine starts learning and does it for you, right? So something that I really, really want to kind of emphasize, especially to this team over here today, is that your time is valuable when you're starting up a new business. Don't spend your time doing things that are the that doesn't require strategy or creativity. Try and find things like, for example, Adbot. One of the other programs that we also use is Exodio. I'll put all of this in the chat as well. That takes care of all the administration stuff, right? It's a very similar process. You don't kind of like work out your accounting in a book anymore. You get Xero, or you get kind of like one of those, I'm on Zoho, to do it all for you. And sometimes you can even link your account and they'll do your balancing all for you. So spend your valuable time on the things that are important and don't spend your time on kind of like the day-to-day stuff that's for machines, I believe, 100%. Okay, so the 3 things that I really want you to kind of like take away from this session is, number 1 is advertising is psychology. Having a messaging or having messaging down is not this big, wow, amazing thing. It's really simple. How am I going to convince this person to buy? Follow the steps, put those steps into the channels, either the lean forward channels, which are the action channels, or the lean back channels, where you're creating kind of like reasons to believe and positive association. And then the last thing is use products like, for example, Adbot and the rest to do the hard work for you. So don't think you're smarter than you are. Let the machines do the work for you, and you focus on your creativity and building your business. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is what we've created is like a little digital funnel, and it's a little bit more detailed than the funnel we spoke about a little bit earlier in the presentation. But it does give you kind of like an indication of what channel to use at what point and what these channels' functions are. For example, once you start with Google or start with Adbot, you'll see that you get a lot of traffic to your website, but then maybe your website hasn't been optimized in order to make sure that you get those sales, which will then kind of, for example, see your leads that are coming in from Google. You need to make sure that your website is optimized. So you can use this as a bit of a platform. And Sandras, you'll share our documents with the team members today as well that explains this funnel in a little bit more detail.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, that's me. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you very much, Michelle. This really has been great. Like, amazing, amazing. And we got some questions. We'll start with some of the first questions. The first, there was a question from Anne. Anne is in Startup Circles. She's building a device that detects blood clots, like super amazing. And her question is, besides using a celebrity as a reason to believe, what else can be used?
You can. It's an interesting question, and I haven't read the book in ages, but there are other reasons to believe as well. One of the things is, why is your product important to the person who's going to purchase it, right? For example, one of the things that I can think of is what we use, Adbot uses. So we have over 1,000 small businesses using our product, and we tell people that. So we say over 1,000 people are using our tool to manage their Google advertising. So that's one of the ways, instead of using an influencer. You're looking for kind of scenarios where you give your customer a reason to believe, and that could be unique selling points of your product. But one of the things that really work is influencers. Maybe not so much for B2B, but even for B2B, they could work. Does that answer your question?
Fantastic. Yes, I think it does, because even in the chat box, like, we got a super helpful community. Some of the people answered, say you could use testimonials, you could do that.
Yeah, exactly. Testimonials is a great one.
Great. So another question from Charles Masiku saying, what's the difference between Google Ads and Google Trends?
Google Ads and Google Trends. So Google Ads, they've made it a little bit more complex because they've kind of collapsed all their products in one, and they called it Google Ads. But Google Ads essentially consists of a whole range of different products, right? So Google Ads, included in Google Ads, you'll have display ads, and in other words, like banners, visuals that you can put out, and those appear on, like, usually on the right-hand side of the website, when you're scrolling through like your sports news or whatever. That's one thing, which is called Google Display Ads. You then have Google Shopping, which is when you're searching for something, those pictures come up and it says where you can purchase it with the price. And then you have Google Search, and search ads is kind of like the word ads, which we've just shown you an example of through the Adbot platform. Google Trends is one of two things. So Trends is essentially looks at what are people searching for in a specific country or in the globe, etc. So it kind of like shows you what people are searching for, and they use the trends to make up the algorithms of what people are searching for. They make up the algorithms for the cost of your ad and when your ad is going to be displayed. So it's a really complex kind of like formula. But Google Trends is essentially what people are searching for. That information is used in order to make almost create a market for your search ads to be displayed to.
Great. Another question from Antonio Tapisha Maloa saying, can giving promotions or price reductions be one of the ways to call for action?
Yeah, absolutely. So in your call to action or your kind of like last lean forward channel, absolutely, for a limited time only, we are going to give you a 20% reduction off the price. Just remember to make it a short period, because if people think, oh, this is going to last forever, they probably won't take action immediately. But yeah, giving a promotion. On our side, what we've done for Adbot is, and works really well, is we would say like we've just done it for the month of June. If you sign up to Adbot, you can win a Yoko machine. And that's one of those little Yoko machines that you tap your card and usually costs customers about 1,200 Rand. So that works really well and applied to the right channels. So if I put that messaging on Facebook, there's not a lot of kind of like action. But if I put that message on Google, there's a lot of action kind of like coming through and conversions coming through. So just remember the right messaging on the right channel.
Thanks. Another question from Anne is, can one use Google Alerts to get ideas of the keywords being searched?
You can, most definitely. But my advice would be let go and let Adbot. In other words, get your initial keywords, put them into the machine, and literally let the machine do the work. What we have done is once you've set up your ad and you go back into your login section, and for those of you who want, we are more than happy to do some demos in the coming weeks if you want. But essentially, when you log back in, there's a section at the bottom where you can help the machine, right? So instead of trying to find keywords, it actually tells you, some people have searched for this thing. Is it relevant or isn't it relevant for you? And you can thumbs up like Tinder for keywords. Thumbs up and thumbs down on the platform to make sure that it matches up with what you do. So my advice is to let the bot do the work, but go in and then help it along.
Another question from Anrisha Naidu, who's also a part of Startup Circles, one of the like early members of the community of Startup Circles, asking, how do you see what keywords are being searched for most in your industry?
So we can help you pull those keywords, but if you literally just Google Trends, and you can actually get to a Google site, which is Google Trends. I can't remember the URL, but essentially there you can play around. You can put in like keywords that you think people are going to search for, and you can actually fill that in. Let me see if I can find the URL for you guys.
Oh, I'll find it. I'll type it. Then
okay,
they could also use Google Keyword Planner, which is part of Google AdWords, which is
absolutely
cool.
Or you can just ask us and we'll pull it and send it.
Absolutely. So I think the one really, really amazing thing that I'd like to add to this is that just Adbot takes out like all that work you need to do to figure all this out. And you do it very quickly. And then the machine learns like, oh, look, your competition is doing this, it's doing that. And is this okay for you? Is this not okay for you? And then say yes, no, yes, no. But it just improves that for you. So one of the reasons, like for me and Startup Circles, in the last 1.5 years, I think we've used like 6, 7 digital marketing experts, because every brother and the mother say that they can do digital marketing, right? Like it's like football. Everybody says, I can play football. But is it like street soccer or World Cup football level, Like everybody says I can. And then everybody then in the end, like, no, but your budget was not great, or this is not great, or none of that. Like there's always blame. So I think this is really good that you got Adbot. So
That's actually a good point, Sandras. Do you mind if I jump in there and just maybe talk about costs? Because one of the things that startups really struggle with is obviously having a budget to advertise, right? On Monday, I had a client who phoned me. She said she spoke to this agency. They really want to help her, but unfortunately, they're charging her 15,000 Rand to do her Google ads. And she was like, well, what are they going to do for all that money? And the reality is because they're using time, they have to charge her about 5,000 Rand for setup fees, 5,000 Rand for monthly fees, and 5,000 Rand for Google, right? So now she's spending 15,000 Rand, where she could have on Adbot just spent 5,000 Rand and the machine does everything for you. We don't charge any setup fees, no monthly fees. Literally your performance kind of like comes out from the actual AdWords. So that's a really good point. I didn't even talk about cost savings.
Great. There's another question from Michelle Caruso. So, okay, before I go to Michelle's question, Michelle is another like amazing student to Startup Circles. She started out and like applied to the Shift Fund and went through, so she went through that and then joined the Ignition program and finally got investments. And
amazing. Well done, Mish.
So this fantastic companies feel good health. And one of the big challenges I know that Michelle has been like us, been spending a lot of money on digital marketing companies and all that. And Michelle managed to raise, I think, like 4 million Rand. Right. So
amazing.
Amazing. So she's at a good spot, like to use all of this. And then we also have Marie from Kipipel. Marie's from Mauritius, also like went through Startup Circles and raised lots of money, $25,000 last month at our demo day, which is super cool. So this is good. I think it's adding on to like the different pieces that the people need, but also the ones who are going through the program and some who have graduated through our programs. You can use Adbot to help you with the traction. And those who know Startup Circles, they say traction. Traction speaks louder than words. Now there's a question from Michelle. Does Adbot also do Google Shopping and display ads?
Not at this point. It is in the kind of like next year to roll out, but at this point, we're only looking at Google search. So we're going to make sure that we deliver really well on that. And then build out to the other platforms. Also, if you think about it, if you have a 5,000 Rand budget to spend, you're not going to split it on display and all sorts. You're going to look at the lean forward channels where people are looking for your brand and services, and that's where you're going to spend. As the market grows, obviously we need to kind of like grow with it. But for now, we're focusing on Google search.
Cool. I like that example of like your distinction of lean back and lean forward. And
it's really like, but it's so easy to kind of like remember. Sorry, Sandras, I keep thinking when you're speaking.
Go ahead.
No, it's so easy to remember because the thing is like, we all think like marketing is this big thing and you have to have these big ideas, but it isn't really. Like it is actually just very practical stuff, things that we know about. We know how to manipulate our parents. If we know how to do that, we know how to manipulate our customers, essentially, in a good way. But and then lean forward and lean back are such good descriptors of the channels. And just by remembering that, lean forward, I'm taking action, lean back, I'm having a chill. I don't want any kind of, go and buy this now. Anyway.
Absolutely. And another way, like how we look at it, and so some of the people who've been through like our Founders Circle program, we're explaining that imagine you are the customer, right? You are about to watch a next Netflix movie and you're waiting for your kids or your wife, your partner to join you, and then you start scrolling through Instagram, right? And then you think, oh, this is interesting. It's not the time where you say buy, like you're not buying anything at that time. You know what I mean? Like same, like you want to sleep now, like okay, now it's time to sleep. I've been working, and then you start scrolling through your Facebook, and then ad pops up. That's not the time to buy. Like somebody says, do this course now. Like, no, I'm not doing this now, right? So like low commitment or just that awareness. So I like that. Like the awareness, reason to believe. I look at it like, oh, cool, interesting. And then at the right time, I know who can ask. Or if I do click on your ad and I go there, I'm like, oh, interesting. Then I leave. Right? That also I think explains why like the bounce rate is very high at certain times, because like I'm not in the mood to buy anything when I'm about to sleep, but I'm scrolling through, and then I go to your website, like, interesting. And then there I'll be like, 2 seconds, what are you doing? Cool. Then I leave. Now you follow me with your retargeting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Remarketing is definitely another session that we can dive into, and how to do it effectively and not just rash people.
Great. So we're going to have a remarketing session at Startup Circles with Michelle, which is super cool. I'm glad that you brought that up. And another question from Fortunatus saying, why do some channels get a lot of viewers but low conversions?
So it's because of that. Exactly like Sandras has explained. Like when you're leaning back and you're going through Facebook, you're waiting for a Netflix series to start. You're not in a mind frame of buying something. Like just before you fall asleep or as you wake up in the morning, you're just browsing through social media. You're very chilled. You're not in a mindset of like buying. So you're in a mindset of receiving good quality information that sits with your values and kind of like matches with you. Channels where the conversion is high is channels where people are kind of, again, leaning forward, looking like, so if you have an emergency or you're like, okay, I've saved up enough, or there's this craving and I have to buy this bag right now, then you're kind of like searching for a bag to buy, or somebody's present, or you need a plumber or an electrician. And that's kind of like when you're leaning forward and you search and you're actively looking for a product or a service that you need to get now. And that's why the conversions are higher, because the person's mindset is different in different channels.
Great. Fantastic.
I actually think you answered that question way better than I did before I answered it.
No, I learned it from the best. I learned it from you. So
flattering will get you everywhere.
I know, like the only time I look good is when I just say things that smart people taught me. So yeah, so I'm doing that. Great. Thank you very much. I think I've covered all the questions. If I missed your question, you can type it again in the chat box. Michelle, thank you very much. I've posted the link to Adbot. So you can go to adbot.co.za. You can just click on that link that we shared, and then we share that in the in Startup Circles, the platform as well. And
okay, great.
Yeah,
and remember to send the PDF that has the funnel.
Yeah, great. We'll send the PDF. Then we'll put the PDF on Startup Circles as well. So yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. And then I'll share just a little bit about Startup Circles and what we're doing at the moment. So, but thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me and for all these amazing